She tossed my $10 in the trash, and the oven dinged like applause. It was October 15th, Charleston, South Carolina. My granddaughter Emma was standing on a chair in her kitchen, cheeks puffed, trying to blow out 8 flickering candles. The light bounced off the marble island, the smell of buttercream frosting mixed with the tang of roasting chicken. I slid a crisp $10 bill into a card, just as my father used to do for me. It wasn't about the amount, it was a seed. Every year I'd match it 10 to 1 in Emma's savings jar. 10 became 100. 100 became her school trip fund, a ritual that meant something. Kayla, my daughter-in-law, opened the envelope before Emma even had a chance. Her lips curled as she read the card. "We don't need pity from a poor old man." She didn't even look at me when she said it. Then she dropped the card. The bill still tucked inside into the stainless steel trash bin like it was coffee grounds. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. The oven timer dinged, sharp and mocking, like the room itself was laughing. Evan, my son, shifted his eyes down to his shoes. Not a word. Emma clapped at the sound, not knowing what had just happened. My throat locked up, but my eyes didn't move. On that same marble island, smudged with grease from takeout boxes, sat a $2,800 invoice from some med spa, due October 20th. I didn't touch it, but I saw the numbers bold at the bottom, circled in pink ink. Next to it, half buried in a stack of unopened envelopes, was a refinance solicitation dated October 12th. 2 symbols of debt and desperation staring at me while my $10 seed lay buried in a bin. I said nothing. I helped Emma slice her cake, listened to her laugh, and stayed through the end of presents. Then I drove back home under Charleston's gas lamps, the air sharp with fall, the tires humming over King Street cobblestones. At my kitchen table, I opened my trust binder, principal balance, $2,043,000 as of September 30th. Layla and I had built it across decades. Me contracting houses, her teaching 3rd grade, both of us saying no to things that glittered but didn't grow. The Whitford Family Trust existed for one reason: to protect Evan and Emma, not to bankroll someone else's vanity. The spendthrift clause sat there, yellow-tabbed. One sentence in black ink that meant I could pause, I could redirect, I could shield. I looked over at the framed photo of my late wife, Lila in her Easter hat, the one she wore the year Emma was born. I whispered to her, "We built this to protect them from pressure, not fund it." The card was still wet when I pulled it from the curbside bin later that night. Coffee grounds smeared the back and a streak of frosting had melted across the front, but the bill was intact. I slipped it into a Ziploc bag, dated it in black Sharpie, and slid it into a box marked Unit 17B, my safe deposit at First Palmetto Bank. Then I pulled out my old iPhone SE, tapped record, and spoke into the mic. October 15th. Kayla called a $10 bill trash money. Amount seen $2,800 med spa invoice due October 20th. Refinance letter dated October 12th. Trust balance $2,043,000. This is where it begins. I ended the note, slipped the phone into my jacket pocket, and let the silence of my empty house breathe back at me. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell me where you're listening from, because where I'm from, $10 is a promise, not a punchline. I poured a glass of water, sat at the oak desk Lila once balanced the checkbook on, and opened my spiral ledger. I wrote a single line in pencil. Insult logged. Begin audit. The scratch of the pencil felt like the first nail driven into a frame. This wouldn't be fast. It wouldn't be loud, but it would be built right. I sat back in the chair, the cool October night pressing at the windows, and felt the truth settle. The battle wasn't about money. It was about memory, dignity, and the discipline to protect a legacy from being turned into fuel for someone's pride. Emma's laugh still rang in my ears, bright as a bell. That was the only sound I wanted to protect. I didn't cry over money. I cried because my wife wasn't here to steady the table. The 2 days after Emma's party moved like wet plaster, thick, heavy, impossible to shape. I went through the motions, shaving, making coffee, sorting the mail. But under all of it was a constant hum, like the house itself was asking, "What now?" Emma's words cut deepest. She didn't mean them. She was only parroting what she'd heard. Why does Grandpa give trash money? She asked as she skipped across the porch when I dropped her off the next morning. She said it with the same innocence she'd say, "Why is the sky blue?" But the sting landed anyway. I stood at the sink that evening, rinsing a single glass far too long. The water hissed and ran, but all I heard was Kayla's voice in replay. Poor old man. In my workshop, dust floated through a shaft of light around 4 p.m. Layla's apron still hung from its peg, faintly smelling of flour and soap. I used to tease her about that apron, how she wore it even to make tea. Standing there now, it felt like armor I couldn't touch. My phone buzzed. A text from Evan. "Dad, let's not make a thing out of this." Just like that. 8 words. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering. Finally, I sent a single thumbs up emoji. It was the most cowardly thing I'd done in years. The message wasn't peace, it was surrender, and I knew it. That night, I sat down at my desk with a stack of Evan's bank slips. I'd pulled them from the mail pile he'd left behind. Numbers don't lie, even when people do. October 6th, $412 to a photo filter app vendor. October 9th, $169 to a brand site some influencer shop Kayla liked. October 12th, mortgage draft, $1,486 cleared with the account balance dipping to nearly zero. This wasn't criminal, it was careless. But careless was enough to swallow Emma's future whole if no one adult stepped in. Collapse, for me, is quiet. It isn't throwing plates or screaming into the dark. It's standing in the hallway at 9:44 p.m., forehead pressed to the cool doorframe, staring at Lila's handwritten recipe for pecan pie. Her loops and curves on the index card felt like someone reaching across time steadying my hand. I thought about what she'd say if she were here. She'd tell me this wasn't about pride, it was about function. About making sure Emma had a roof, tuition, heat in the winter. That dignity wasn't a feeling, it was a ledger. I closed the slips, slid them into a manila envelope, and wrote the word pressure across the front in pencil. Then I placed it in the binder between the trust statement and the spendthrift clause. The next morning, I brewed coffee I didn't want, poured it into a chipped mug, and sat at the table staring at the sunlight climbing the wall. Collapse gave me clarity. If Kayla's insult had been a spark, these numbers were the firewood stacked behind it. Left alone, it would burn the house down. I picked up my phone and scrolled to a name I hadn't dialed in months. Mara, my neighbor, a CPA who balanced church books like a surgeon with a scalpel. I typed, "Coffee tomorrow morning? Need a favor." Then I called Attorney Delgado Pist's office. His voicemail clicked on. I swallowed, then started, "This is Harris Whitford. I SEP am the trustee of the Whitford Family Trust. I think it's SEP's time we got boring." My voice cracked on the last word. Not from fear, but from the weight of saying out loud what I already knew. This wasn't about revenge yet. It was about structure. I set the phone down, leaned back in my chair, and closed my eyes. For the first time since the oven dinged in Kayla's kitchen, I felt the faintest hint of direction. The audit had to begin. Not with fury, but with discipline. If you want justice, learn to love paper. October 17th, 9 a.m. The sky over Charleston was clean and sharp, the kind of blue that makes you think of fresh paint. I sat across from Attorney Delgado at his walnut desk. He adjusted his glasses, tapped the yellow-tabbed clause in my binder, and said, "You don't punish, you pause." His voice was calm, precise. "Request substantiation for distributions. Demand basic needs proof. Keep records like a librarian with a badge." The word pause hung in the air. It wasn't dramatic, it was bureaucratic, and that's why it would work. Afterward, I drove 3 blocks to Mara's kitchen. Her place always smelled faintly of cinnamon, the way church halls do on potluck Sundays. She'd already pulled her scanner from the closet and spread color-coded tabs across the table. The hum of the machine was steady, like a low sermon. "Blue for debt," she said, handing me a stack. "Red for luxury, green for essentials." By noon, we had tallied close to $34,700 in consumer debt. Department store cards, deferred interest furniture, spa bills, Kayla's fingerprints on nearly every page. Each receipt slid into a sleeve, each sleeve into the binder. I wrote the totals into my spiral notebook. Every action logged with date and minute October 17th, 11:42 a.m. $169 clothing site tagged red. The spiral was my shield. If questioned, I'd have the numbers neat and undeniable. That afternoon, I walked into First Palmetto Bank. My breath fogged slightly as the automatic doors whooshed closed behind me. The clerk recognized me, nodded, and pulled up the trust file. I added a note. All inquiries to route through Trustee H. Whitford, no exceptions. On the way home, I stopped at my workshop. The smell of pine shavings wrapped around me, grounding me. I opened a banker's box and sorted through the mail Evan had left strewn across the island. There it was, the October 12th refinance letter. The bold print offered cash-out options like candy. I slid it into a sleeve, tabbed red. Behind it, unopened flyers for reward cards, glossy charity requests, a local boutique catalog. My hand stopped shaking as the system took shape. For the first time since the oven dinged, I felt like I was the adult in the room again. That evening, I set the binder on my desk, closed it, and whispered to Lila Sepp's photo. This will be slow, this will be polite, and it will be absolute. Before bed, I flipped to the back of my notebook and penciled something that made me almost smile. The image of Kayla squirming between a CPA and a church treasurer was almost enough to let me sleep. But sleep didn't come easy. Around 2 a.m., I found myself pacing the kitchen, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. I imagined Delgado's voice repeating, "You don't punish, you pause." I repeated it back like a mantra. Justice wouldn't come in fireworks. It would come in invoices, in ledgers, in calm signatures on dotted lines, and I was ready to wait. I didn't slam any doors. I tightened hinges. November 3rd arrived with a damp chill. At 8:15 a.m., I walked into the post office and slid 3 certified letters across the counter. Each was addressed in my careful block handwriting, Evan and Kayla's home address, Delgado's office, and First Palmetto Bank. The wording inside was calm, almost boring. Routine audit of discretionary distributions. Temporary pause effective immediately. Future requests must include receipts proving essential need. No accusations, no heat, just process. Bureaucracy was my hammer and the law was the nail. That night I slept better than I had in weeks. November 5th, I went out to the workshop. The padlock on the back door had grown stiff with salt air, but it still clicked shut with finality when I swapped it for a new one. The sound echoed like a gavel. The following morning, November 6th, I logged into the Trust's online portal. I rotated the password and wrote it down in my spiral. 11:06 portal PW changed. 8:17 a.m. clean precise. I slipped the note into the binder behind the trust clause. November 7th, 8:10 a.m. I met Evan at Page's Okra Grill. The smell of fried shrimp and biscuits hit us before we even sat down. He looked tired, shoulders slumped, eyes carrying weight. I slid 3 papers across the table. The $2,800 med spa bill due October 20th, the refinance letter from October 12th, and a chart Mara had printed showing his account balance, dipping each month around the mortgage draft of $1,486. I didn't say the word Kayla, not once. "This is pressure, son," I said. Instead, my voice was even. "This is the kind of pressure that swallows futures." Evan rubbed his temples, his fork untouched. I leaned forward, tapping the yellow highlighted spendthrift clause I SEP tucked into the folder. "This doesn't set have to be punishment. It's SEP structure. From now on, you SEP put in writing what you need, not what looks good on a screen." He nodded, a small crack in his composure. "Okay." I handed him a yellow legal pad. "Start writing, roof, heat, Emma sipped school. That sips all." We finished our breakfast mostly in silence. Outside, the morning sun glanced off windshields in the parking lot, and for the first time in weeks I felt like maybe Evan was hearing me. Back home, I pulled Lila's runner from the cedar chest and laid it across the dining table. The faded pattern looked like autumn leaves, stitched with care decades ago. I placed a single setting plate, fork, knife, water glass. Then I stood back. This table would hold more than turkey in a few weeks. It would hold the weight of truth, and it needed to be ready. For the rest of the week, I carried myself differently. Each step, each note logged in my spiral, felt like tightening a hinge, not explosive, not violent, just quiet adjustments no one could undo. I kept repeating Delgado's words under my breath. You don't punish, you pause. By the weekend, the house was cleaner, my binder thicker, and my resolve unshakable. This wasn't revenge for a $10 bill anymore. This was about guarding a legacy from rot. And the hinges were set. Real power is sometimes just withholding a pen. Between November 10th and 14th, the pieces began to lock into place. This wasn't rage anymore, it was design. Delgado drafted a simple addendum to the trust. From here on, distributions would move directly to Evan for essentials only. Mortgage at $1,486, utilities, Emma's school costs. No spousal access, no third-party pledges, just lanes, neat and narrow. Mara, steady as ever, prepared a one-page affidavit summarizing the spending pattern we'd logged. She read it aloud at her kitchen table, her finger tapping each line. October 6th, $412, filter app. October 9th, $169, clothing site. October 20th, $2,800, med spa invoice due. Every number landed like a drumbeat. She signed it with a flourish and slid it into a plastic sleeve. Meanwhile, I turned to evidence that spoke without words. My old iPhone SE, cracked screen, battery that barely held, was loaded with photos only. No recordings, nothing sneaky, just images. The first photo, the damp $10 card, coffee-stained but legible. The second, the $2,800 invoice, due date circled. The third, the October 12th refinance letter. The fourth, the spendthrift clause, yellow-tabbed, clear as law. I practiced swiping through them slowly, imagining the weight of silence in the room when I did. By November 14th, invitations for Thanksgiving were out. I wrote them on cream cardstock Lila had once ordered for Emma Sip's christening. The words were simple. Dinner at my home, November 28th, noon. Then came the stagecraft. I sat at my dining table with an index card and mapped the seating chart. At the head, me. To my right, Aunt Louise, church treasure, quiet but commanding. To my left, Mara, with her binder brain and calm tone. Beside Mara, Kayla. Beside Aunt Louise, Evan. The rest of the table filled with cousins and neighbors, but that core alignment was the hinge. Kayla pinned between two women who could smell numbers the way a dog smells fear. I taped the seating card inside the hutch like a stage manager, leaving notes for actors. Then I set the cranberry sauce timer for 1:15 p.m. on Thanksgiving Day. A simple kitchen tool, but in my plan it was the bell that would slice through chatter and demand attention. To seal the preparation, I bought a $10,000 cashier's check, payable to Emma's 529 plan. The bank teller slid it across the counter, green ink on cream paper. I tucked it into an envelope and tied it with a green ribbon. Lila had once saved from a florist bouquet. That check wasn't just money. It was the embodiment of discipline. $10 multiplied by patience. At home, I slipped it into the trust binder, behind Mara's affidavit, ready to slide out at the exact moment. Evenings grew colder, and each night I polished silverware that hadn't seen daylight in years. I laid out the serving knives, checked the linen runner, and lit a single candle to see how shadows would fall across the table. It felt theatrical, almost absurd, planning a reveal like this. But Kayla had turned the stage into her weapon long ago. Instagram posts of champagne glasses, spa selfies, captions about living your best life. She lived for audience. I would simply give her one she couldn't control. When I finally closed the binder one night, I caught myself whispering to Legisla's photo again. Every hinge is tight. Every nail straight. The table will hold. And I believed it. The audit was no longer just on paper. It was about to take flesh at the Thanksgiving table. You can hear panic in a declined card. November 20th, late afternoon. I was sanding a scrap of oak in the workshop when Evan pulled up. He came in with a folded receipt, his shoulders hunched. dead, he said quietly. Her card got declined. He handed me the slip. A $1,250 charge labeled Wellness Retreat Deposit. The line at the bottom read in sharp black letters, declined. Evan's voice cracked. "She's sis furious," said I, embarrassed her. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed, Kayla's number. I let it ring once before I picked up. Her voice was sugared at first. "Hi, Harris. There seems to be some confusion with the accounts." Then, sharp as glass. "You sup are embarrassing my family." "I'm protecting it," I said, and before the next insult landed, I hung up. The silence afterward was louder than her words. On November 22nd, Delgado finalized the addendum. He emailed me a PDF, clear, clinical, legal, distributions, discretionary, routed to Evan for essentials only. Mortgage $1,486. Utilities Emma's school. No spousal access, no third-party pledges. I printed it, slid it into a sleeve, and logged the time in my spiral, 11:20 seconds, 2:43 p.m. 2 days later, November 24th, the mail brought another blow, a past due notice from the med spa. The original $2,800 invoice now carried an additional $75 late fee. The numbers stared back, bold and unforgiving. I noted its arrival time, 11:12 a.m., and slid it into the red tab section of the binder. Each page became heavier, the binder thick with proof. Thanksgiving crept closer, and the house shifted into preparation. The night before, I polished the good knives until they gleamed like mirrors. I roasted pecans and spread them on a towel to cool, their sweet, nutty smell filling the kitchen. The house was so quiet I could hear the refrigerator click on and off. I placed the old iPhone SE on a small wooden stand at my seat at the dining table. Not hidden, not secret, just waiting. Loaded with photos, ready to show. The binder rested in the hutch, Mara's affidavit and Delgado's addendum tucked neatly inside. The $10,000 check sat in its envelope, green ribbon intact. On the morning of November 28th, Thanksgiving Day, I rose before dawn. The harbor air was damp, the sky still gray. At 10:30 a.m., I slid the turkey into the oven, its skin glistening with butter and sage. Then I twisted the cranberry sauce timer to 1:15. The bell would be my signal. The house filled with smells of roasting meat, cinnamon, and coffee. I set the table with Lila's runner, her silverware, the plates she'd chosen when we first married, each place card laid carefully. And as I stepped back to look at it all, the room felt like a stage. The lines rehearsed, the props in place, the audience unaware of the performance about to begin. This wasn't just a dinner, it was the hinge moment. And when the bell rang, truth would finally have its seat at the table. The cranberry timer dinged, and the room stopped breathing. Thanksgiving, November 28th, noon sharp. The air in my Charleston home carried the warm weight of roasted turkey, sage, and sweet potatoes. Oyster knives clinked on the back porch as cousins pried shells open. Laughter echoed in pockets, but beneath it all I felt the drumbeat of what was coming. Emma darted through the hallway, clutching a folded piece of paper. "Grandpa, I'm practicing my poem," she shouted, cheeks pink with excitement. She climbed onto a chair, cleared her throat, and recited halting lines about gratitude. The room clapped, Kayla louder than anyone, her smile as polished as the pearl earrings swinging from her lobes. I checked the timer on the counter, 12:58. The cranberry sauce bubbled low and slow, timer's hand winding toward its mark. At 1:10, plates filled, chatter grew. Kayla was in full display mode, recounting Emma's ballet recital, as if she alone had choreographed it. Evan nodded, tired but compliant. Aunt Louise dabbed her napkin politely, saying little. Mora watched, quiet, her eyes flicking to me. At exactly 1:15, the bell sliced through the noise. Sharp, metallic, final, the chatter stuttered. Emma froze mid-giggle, chairs squeaked. Even the oyster knives outside went silent. I stood, lifting my old iPhone SE from its stand. My hand was steady. This, I said, holding up the first photo, was called Trash Money. On the screen, the image of Emma's birthday card appeared, the $10 bill smudged with coffee, frosting streak across the ink. Gasps rippled faintly. In my father Set's house, I continued, $10 was never trash. It was a promise, a seed we match, 10 to 1. It was how we taught children to grow, not consume. I swiped to the next image, the $2,800 MedSpa invoice, due October 20th. The bold numbers glared. This was left on the kitchen counter the night I was told I was a poor old man. Evan shifted in his chair, face pale. Kayla's jaw tightened. I swiped again, the refinance letter dated October 12th. This unopened offered cash-out options. Debt pretending to be salvation. Mara reached for her water glass, calm but watchful. Aunt Louise folded her hands, eyes fixed on Kayla. I swiped once more, the spendthrift clause, yellow-tabbed. The words glowed under the kitchen light. And this is the rule of the Whitford Family Trust. A rule that says I don't have to fund disrespect, that I can pause, redirect, and protect. Kayla's chair scraped against the wood. A wineglass tipped, spilling a crimson trail across Lila's linen runner. Emma startled, looking to her father. I set the iPhone down, then reached into the hutch and pulled out the cream envelope tied with the green ribbon. Slowly, I slid out the $10,000 cashier's check. The ink was sharp, the numbers undeniable. This, I said, placing it in the center of the table, is for Emma Sip's 529 college plan. $10 multiplied by discipline. We can sign it today, but only if we agree on one thing. The room was silent. Even the refrigerator hum felt muted. Money is for needs first: roof, heat, school, not image, not vanity. Needs. Kayla Sip's face flushed deep red. This is humiliating, she hissed. You supped, you're shaming me in front of family. No, Aunt Louise interrupted, her voice steady as a hymn. He Sep's teaching. The shame was yours the day you tossed his gift. Mara leaned forward, her tone clinical but kind. The affidavit shows patterns of spending that left the account near empty each mortgage cycle. This isn't Sep punishment. It's Sep's preservation. Kayla looked around, expecting rescue, but none came. Evan's eyes glistened as he stared at the check, his lips pressed thin. Dad, he whispered. Thank you. Emma, still confused, asked softly, is that for my school? I crouched beside her chair, smoothing her hair. Yes, sweetheart, for your future. $10 that grows. Kayla pushed her chair back with a screech, nearly knocking it over. Her hands trembled as she grabbed her phone, scrolling furiously as if the glow of a screen could erase the ink on the table. But the power had shifted. I uncapped the pen beside the check and held it out, not to Kayla but to Evan. This is yours to sign, I said. Not hers, yours. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Evan reached forward, hand shaking, and took the pen. He pressed it to paper, signing his name. The check was sealed, the promise intact. The room exhaled as one, like a tide pulling back from shore. Kayla's pearl earring swung wildly as she turned, but no words came, only silence. I set the pen down, capped it with deliberate calm, and whispered, the table holds. Emma clapped as if a play had ended, not realizing she was part of the story. Dinner resumed, awkward but steady. Conversations stumbled back to turkey, to pies, to oyster dressing, but the check sat in the center like a new sun. And Kayla, for once, had no light to steal. When image breaks, it cuts the one holding it. The morning after Thanksgiving, November 29th, Kayla took her fight to the place she trusted most to screen. She posted a story with a pale pink background in cursive font, the kind meant to look soft while it draws blood. Toxic elders tried to control our family money. Boundaries matter. No names, of course. She never uses names. She uses mirrors and hopes the right reflection bleeds. I didn't answer the post. I forwarded a screenshot to Delgado, who texted back, not actionable, stay boring. So I did what boring people do. I made coffee, washed the good knives by hand, and logged the post in my spiral with the date and time. 11/29, 8:27 a.m. Smear implied no response. On December 1st at 5:40 a.m., Evan arrived with a banker's box. He set it on my kitchen table like it contained a sleeping animal, He didn't want to wake. Inside old statements, a camera lens he'd never used but financed anyway, an unopened box of branded sneakers for Emma that were 2 sizes too big, and on top Emma's clay turkey from school, tail cracked down the middle. We didn't speak much. The harbor outside was still gray. The house felt like it was holding its breath. I poured 2 mugs of coffee and slid a yellow legal pad between us. Roof, heat, school, I said. Write those at the top. He did. The pen scratched across the paper, slow and deliberate. We built a simple budget from the bones outward. Mortgage $1,486 auto draft. Utilities averaged from the last 6 statements. Emma's after-school program, groceries that didn't pretend to be a brand. I wrote each line in pencil, irascible but real. Around 7, Mara knocked with a thermos and her own ledger. She took the banker's box like a nurse takes a chart. Let's align your actuals, she said, spreading statements across the table. Her tone wasn't shaming. It was clinical, the mercy of clarity. By 9, she'd drafted her 1-page affidavit, the one we'd foreshadowed for weeks. She read it aloud the way a choir reads a hymn, measured, unflinching. October 6th, $412 filter app. October 9th, $169 clothing site. Mortgage $1,486, posting against low balance. Pattern of non-essential spending contributing to recurring near-zero balances. She signed at the bottom, slid the page into a plastic sleeve, and handed Evan a copy. Knowledge, she said, isn't shame, it's steering. Delgado, true to form, followed with a letter the next day, polite, almost sleepy, with just enough edge to remind anyone reading it that ink beats impulse. As a routine matter, distributions are paused pending substantiation and will resume for essentials routed to the beneficiary directly. No moralizing, just lanes. The med spa called twice that week, once leaving a voicemail that tried to sound friendly and landed as desperate. Delgado returned their call. I didn't hear what he said, but later that afternoon an email arrived, addressed to Mr. Whitford, trustee, apologizing for any misunderstanding regarding third-party payment expectations. I printed it, 3-hole punched it, and slid it into the red tab section with the original invoice and late notice. Consistency isn't cruelty. It's kindness that's grown a spine. Meanwhile, Kayla kept posting, pivoting from toxic elders to self-care. Photos of candles and bath salts. A quote about releasing what no longer serves you. She tagged a wellness brand that had once sent her a discount code she treated like a crown. I didn't take the bait. I watered the rosemary plant on the porch and sharpened a chisel in the workshop. On December 5th, the hinge shifted. Evan knocked at dusk, the sky the color of bruised steel. He came in quietly, carrying a duffel and 2 plastic bins. She's staying with a friend for a while, he said. Eyes on the floor. He set the bins down, then took Emma's clay turkey from the counter with both hands. She wants this on her nightstand. We ate soup without talking much. After we stood in the doorway with our coats on while the cold pushed at our backs. Dad, he said, voice steadying, I don't think you humiliated anyone. You just kept the roof. Roofs are underrated, I said, and he actually smiled. That night, after he left, I opened the binder and checked the order of things like a pilot before takeoff. Mara's affidavit. Delgado's addendum. The apology from the med spa. The printed screenshot of Kayla's post, annotated with the date and time. The $10,000 cashier's check stub. Copy filed with First Palmetto. Everything in its sleeve. Everything dated. Everything dull. I slid a sticky note onto the inside cover. No fire, just daylight. The next morning I woke before dawn to the quiet click of the heat kicking on. A small mercy, paid for and therefore tender. I stood at the window with my coffee and watched the street wake up, dog walkers, a jogger, a delivery van. The world didn't care about our drama. It cared about proof of payment and the discipline to keep making it. When the mail came, there was a thin envelope from the bank confirmation that the auto draft for the mortgage was set correctly in Evan's name, routed from distributions as needed. I traced the numbers with a finger the way a man touches a name on a headstone, grateful and reverent. Revenge wasn't fire. It was lanes painted straight, a roof that didn't leak, a child's lamp that turned on every night. By the end of that week, my ledger showed a different kind of balance. Not sentimental, functional. The house breathed easier. Emma's laugh sounded more like it had before October 15th. Kayla kept posting. I kept logging. Evan kept showing up with receipts that matched needs instead of wants. The storm hadn't passed, but the structure held, and when structure holds, storms get tired. Justice isn't fire, it's balance sheets and daylight. December 6th, Charleston. The air outside Delgado's office smelled faintly of salt and diesel from the harbor, but inside the walnut-paneled conference room, it was all paper and ink. A long table stretched between us, polished so clean you could see the reflection of every folder. I sat on one side, binder at my elbow. Evan next to me, shoulders drawn but steady. Across from us, Kayla and her attorney, a man with a slick briefcase and a habit of tapping his pen too fast. Delgado entered quietly, carrying nothing but a slim folder. He greeted everyone as if this were a church meeting, then sat at the head of the table. His calm was a weapon sharper than anything I could bring. I slid the binder across the polished wood, its plastic sleeves whispering as it moved. On top sat Mara's affidavit, crisp and signed. Beneath it the spendthrift clause with its yellow tab like a stoplight. Delgado tapped the clause gently. The Whitford Family Trust is discretionary. That means distributions are not guaranteed. They're granted at the trustee's discretion. His voice was even, kind, but final. The trustee has elected to restructure those distributions for the sake of preservation. Kayla Sips's attorney leaned forward. My client was led to believe there would be consistent, unrestricted access. Delgado smiled politely, sliding the binder an inch closer to him. Trusts don't read in feelings, counselor. They read in ink. I reached into the hutch of documents and pulled the cream envelope tied with the green ribbon. I slid out the $10,000 cashier's check and set it in the center of the table. Its ink glowed under the overhead lights. This, I said, is what $10 means in our family. It multiplies through discipline, not through image. This check is payable to Emma Sip's 529 college plan. It is not negotiable for spas, retreats, or brand sites. It is negotiable for tuition, books, and her roof when she needs one. Evan's eyes glassed, his hand gripping the edge of the table. Kayla shifted in her chair, pearls at her ears trembling as if they'd heard something they didn't like. Her attorney tried again. There were oral promises. Delgado didn't flinch. Oral promises don't just amend trusts. If you have a written amendment, produce it. Otherwise, discretionary means what it says. Mara's affidavit lay open, line by line, October 6th. $412 filter app, October 9th. $169 clothing site. October 20th, $2,800 med spa invoice past due. The pattern spoke louder than any argument in the room. Kayla's hands fluttered on the table, fingers brushing her phone, as if a screen could rescue her here the way it had online. But the screen was powerless against black and white ink. Delgado Sip's voice stayed steady. Effective immediately, distributions will route directly to Evan for essentials, mortgage $1,486, utilities, Emma Sip's educational costs. No spousal access, no third-party pledges. The words hung in the air like bricks being laid, one on top of the other, building a wall she could not climb. I looked at Evan. Then, deliberately, I slid the pen toward him. This is yours to sign, son. To agree that money means roof, heat, school, nothing less, nothing more. His hand shook as he took it. The sound of the pen scratching across the check register was the sound of justice. Not loud, but final. Kayla's attorney leaned back, deflated. Kayla herself stared at the table, fury painted across her face but trapped, with no words sharp enough to pierce ink and claws. I closed the binder with a soft thud. This isn't Sep punishment, it's Sep's protection. For Emma, for the name on this trust, for the work Lila and I did to build it. Evan exhaled, long and heavy. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small brass key. He slid it across the table toward me. Found this under the porch planter, he said. We don't leave keys there anymore. It was such a small thing, but it hit me harder than any victory. A boundary respected. A lesson learned. For a moment, silence filled the room. Not heavy, but clean. The kind of silence that comes after a storm has spent itself. Delgado closed his folder, nodded to me, and said, "Justice isn't set noise. It sets structure." I believed him. We rose from the table. Evan carried the binder, careful like it was a newborn. Kayla left quickly, heels clicking too fast, her attorney trailing behind. Outside, the December air cut sharp against my face, but it felt like clarity, not cold. For the first time since October 15th, I felt the ledger balance in more than numbers. Justice had arrived, not with fire or fury, but with daylight on a balance sheet, a check signed for the right reason, and a key no longer hidden under a planter. Real revenge is a stocked pantry, and a bill paid on time. By December 10th, the air in Charleston had that metallic bite it gets before Christmas, the kind of chill that makes your hands sting on a steering wheel. My house felt different, not louder, not busier, just lighter, as if a pressure had leaked out through the chimney and never returned. Emma came over that afternoon, bundled in a purple coat 2 sizes too big. We sat at the kitchen table, sanding the little birdhouse we'd built from scraps in my workshop. She leaned over the roof with serious concentration while I brushed away the sawdust. When we were done, I slipped a $10 bill under its roof and sealed it with clear laminate. She tilted her head. "Why sift you put money in a birdhouse?" "So it never flies away," I said. She giggled, the sound pure and clean, and that was enough. For me, that birdhouse wasn't a craft. It was a private joke, a monument to everything we'd just survived. $10 might look small, but under the right roof, it grows wings that actually carry you somewhere. That night, I opened my ledger. I wrote 3 lines in pencil, neat and measured. Mortgage auto-paid. Utilities set. 529 funded. Then I closed the book, slid my glasses off, and let myself breathe. Coffee tasted like coffee again. Not bitterness, not worry, just coffee. I thought about Lila, her handwriting on recipe cards, the way she laughed when pecans cracked under her rolling pin. She'd tell me I overdid it, that I turned a dinner table into a courtroom. But then she'd smile and say, "At least you kept the roof, Harris," and she'd be right. I walked into the dining room and touched the runner she'd sewn decades ago. The stains from Thanksgiving hadn't come out. The red wine blot still spread across one corner. But instead of scrubbing harder, I left it. Proof that the table had held. Proof that battles can end without fire if the foundation is strong. Later, sitting by the window, I thought about everyone who might be listening to this. Folks in the States, in the UK, anywhere someone has been told they're cheap, old, or not enough. Hear me plain. Generosity without boundaries is a leak. It doesn't matter how much you pour if the vessel is cracked. We fixed the pipe. I whispered that line to myself like a prayer, because revenge, when it's clean, isn't about destruction. It's about preservation. It's about protecting the quiet things that matter. A child's lamp that clicks on at bedtime, a pantry that's never empty, a college fund that doesn't vanish into vanity. I slid the iPhone SE into a drawer, the one still loaded with the photos I'd swiped through at Thanksgiving. I placed Leela's pecan pie recipe card on top of it. That was my final entry. I didn't need evidence anymore. Justice had been served in signatures and silence. Revenge had been written in ledgers, not raised voices. And when I finally turned off the kitchen light that night, the house didn't feel empty. It felt earned. The first Christmas card arrived without her name. December 18th, a plain white envelope slid through the mail slot. Inside was a simple card from Evan. No glitter, no photos. Just block letters in his handwriting. "Dad, thanks for being the adult." Tucked behind it was a bank slip showing the deposit of $10,000 into Emma's 529 account, dated December 9th. I held that slip longer than the card, tracing the numbers like Braille. $10 had turned into discipline, and discipline had turned into a future. Later that week, Mara dropped by with an amortization schedule. She set it on the table like she was delivering a hymn book. "This," she said, tapping the staircase of numbers, "is what progress looks like. Step by step, interest reduced, principal shrinking. I nodded, feeling the strange comfort of math that went in the right direction. For once, the numbers didn't accuse. They promised. Kayla shifted her theater to another stage. Her posts softened, swapping toxic elders for self-care journeys. Photos of candles, captions about resilience. Not apologies, but camouflage. She wanted to shape the narrative, but the ink in Delgado's addendum spoke louder than any hashtag ever could. I didn't respond, not even once. Instead, I sat with Emma one Saturday morning while she showed me her clay turkey, tail now glued back together. She held it up proudly. Fixed with glue and patience, she said, repeating the words her teacher must have used. I smiled. That sip's all most things need. That night, I wrote it on a post-it glue and patience, and stuck it inside the ledger underlined twice. For Lila, for myself. In the quiet evenings leading up to Christmas, the house felt warmer, not just because the heat was on, but because the fear of collapse had finally lifted. Every bill that cleared without panic, every receipt that matched a need instead of a want, every laugh from Emma that rang through the rooms, all of it was proof that structure works better than spectacle. I realized then that the true aftermath of revenge isn't scorched earth, it's fertile ground. It's giving someone a chance to rebuild, even if they don't realize they need it yet. The first Christmas card may have arrived without her name, but it didn't arrive empty. It carried proof that what we'd built wasn't gone. It had simply been redirected. And that was enough. The last laugh was a receipt. December 24th, late afternoon. King Street glowed under Charleston's gas lamps. The air cool enough to make you tuck your chin into your collar. I pushed open the door to Berkeley's bookstore, the bell above it chiming that soft paper dust note I've loved since I was a boy. I didn't just come for presents. I came for proof. Behind the counter sat a man with a cardigan and a careful smile. Taped to the register under curling Scotch tape was a $10 bill, sun-faded but still green. "First sale we ever made," he said when he saw me looking. 1983. I nodded. "Good to keep the first thing that kept you." He laughed, then rang me up for two old-fashioned ledgers, linen covers, crisp columns, $12.95 each. He tore the receipt from the printer and handed it over like a medal. I slid it into my wallet without folding it. When I stepped back onto the sidewalk, my phone buzzed with a bank alert. Whitford Family Trust Principal, $2,049,600. Quarterly uptick posted. The number felt like a quiet tide lifting the hull of a boat, not fireworks buoyancy. I stood under a gas lamp and looked up at that winter sky. "Honey," I said out loud to Lila, "we kept the house of our name. I didn't storks earth, I planted a fence. And fences don't just keep danger out, they keep discipline in." I walked home, the ledgers wrapped under my arm, the receipt a small warm square against my chest. At the corner, a woman struggled with a bag of groceries in the cold wind. I held the door for her and thought of all the doors I had held lately. Foundations really, so they wouldn't blow off their hinges. Back inside, the house smelled faintly of cinnamon and clean heat. I set one ledger on my desk, opened the other, and ran a finger down the first blank column. Those columns are plain things, but they have a gravity to them once you start filling them with the truth. Aphorisms get mocked until they save you. Here's the one that saved me. Money isn't love. It's proof you showed up on time. I wrote the date at the top of page 1. Then a single line balances a boundary that loves you back. I could have written paragraphs. I could have written a sermon. But a ledger doesn't want poetry. It wants facts that behave. On the mantel, the family photo from Emma's party sat in a new frame. No one would know by looking that a $10 bill had been tossed in a bin that day, that an oven ding had sounded like applause for contempt. No one would know that a table later bore a $10,000 check like a lighthouse on linen. No one would know that justice arrived in clauses, not claws. But I would know, and so would Emma one day when she looked at the roof over her head and the books paid for in her hands. I poured coffee, not to drink, but to hold for a moment. Warm things remind you that you're here. Then I walked to Emma's chair at the dining table, the same chair that had once been too big for her, the same chair where she'd recited gratitude with a child's bravery. I laid the second ledger there and tied around it a red ribbon from Lila's old sewing tin. The knot came easy. My hands remembered the work. Emma will get that ledger when she's ready. She'll decide what to write. Maybe the first thing will be a deposit slip. Maybe it'll be a grocery list for a first apartment. Maybe it'll be nothing at all for a year while she learns how to breathe in her own life. Discipline waits. It does not chase. I sat at my desk and slid open the drawer with the old iPhone SE inside. The photos were still there. The smudged $10 card, the $2,800 invoice, the refinance letter, the tabbed clause. Evidence, all of it. I thought about deleting the folder and decided not to. Not out of pettiness, but history. You don't have to retell a fire to respect the ash. On the credenza, the Thanksgiving runner still held a pale map of Kayla's spilled wine. I had tried a dozen tricks. The stain held on. I ran a thumb across it and let it be. That red shape is a signature, too. Proof that the table held and truth got poured. People talk about closure like it's a switch. It isn't. Closure is a series of paid bills. It's a child asleep with the lamp on. It's a door that locks with a key you don't hide under a planter anymore. And it's a sentence that shows up when your chest gets tight. You didn't lose me, you gave me away. I say it to Kayla in my head, without malice, as a diagnosis. Pride does that. It trades good for glitter, then blames the mirror when the shine refuses to stay. Maybe one day she'll learn that image isn't income and applause isn't equity. Maybe not. My job is done either way. I turned off the desk lamp and stood in the half-dark, the gas lamps outside painting thin gold ladders on the floorboards. In the quiet, I heard what I'd been working toward since October 15th. Nothing, no alarms, no late notices, no panic in a decline code. Just the house breathing even. I picked up my pen and opened the ledger again. On page 1 beneath the date, and that single line I wrote a title for everything we'd that built and saved and mended. A promise is just discipline written down. Then I capped the pen, set it on the desk, and let the night keep the rest.